this. I'm just playing a little guitar. So the 80s, there were a lot of horror movies. A lot of horror movies. So it's quite easy to overlook some hidden gems that might have been out there. It was really easy to bypass these because there were so many horror movies that were coming out in the 80s. As I said before, some of this was because we had a chance for independent filmmakers to start making movies, not just the big Hollywood production studios. And I think one of these hidden gems was a movie called Trick or Treat. Not to be mistaken with Trick or Treat, which is one of my Halloween staples that I always go and watch pretty much every Halloween since it came out, almost 20 years after this movie came out, which was 1986. Now, in Europe it had another title, and that was Ragman of Death, 33 RPM, which, once you know what this movie is about, actually makes a lot more sense. But we're going to get to that soon. So this was a mid-range movie in terms of budget, made in 1986. It wasn't super low budget, but it didn't have any of the high budget movies that were coming out at the time. And one reason why you might have missed this movie was because it was nestled between a lot of really, really big movies that came out like the previous year, that year, and the year after. We had Nightmare on Elm Street 2, we had The Fly, Aliens, Friday the 13th Part 4, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, Poltergeist 2, amongst many more. So yeah, 86 was a great year for horror movies. Those ones I mentioned were only 86. A month or two before or a month or two after. So they were getting all the commercial attention. Well, this one was kind of left in the wings. People remembering it a lot later on. It kind of became a cult classic. Now the story is quite simple actually. And this will also explain why the European title makes a bit more sense. So a famous metal rocker, Sammy Kerr, dies in a fire. A high school student, his name Eddie Weinberg, I think that's how you pronounce his name anyway, played by Mark Pierce, who was better known to be in Family Ties as Erwin Skippy Handelman. So he had already got a name for himself in Family Ties at this point. But he was, this Sammy Kerr's #1 fan. And when he found out he died, he became really distraught at the news that, his idol had died. Now, Eddie is one of those kids in the 80s who's picked on for being like someone who listens to metal, kind of a loner kind of character. And you have the classic, 80s trope, high school jerk kids wearing the polo shirts going on at the same time. So he's being picked on, he got pranked, his idol's dead, you can tell he's not having a good week. Now by luck, his DJ friend from the local rock station, played by the one and only Gene Simmons, yes, that Gene Simmons, the frontman for Kiss, he gives Sammy Kerr's last album. It's like a hidden album that was never meant to come out. So Eddie goes back home and he plays the record, and when he plays it backwards, he hears a message, like when he used to play the records backwards and people say you heard like voices, a demonic message like you are that kind of thing. And basically the spirit of the rockers telling this kid what to do. So the next day he goes out, he picks a fight with the jerks that play the prank on him, and lo and behold, the spirit manages to connect through electricity somehow and almost kills the kids. So Eddie finally figures out that, it's his hero, Sammy, who's helping him. But is he really helping him? And that's the thing. Eventually, Sammy goes way too far, actually trying to really kill people, and Eddie has to stop him. He enlists his friend Roger Marcos, played by Glenn Morgan. Now, You might not really recognize the face, but the name you might have seen on credits in TV shows. He's been a producer in quite a few big hit shows like Space Above and Beyond, the movie with Jet Li, The One, Warden, that rap movie, and the Final Destination movies. Those became a big hit. The TV show The Commish, and most notably, he was the producer for X-Files. So it's a face you might not recognize, but you've probably seen his name on the credits once in a while. So they decided that they must stop the evil spirit Dead Rocker coming back to life and killing us all. So, yeah, the story is not super complex. It's nothing really new, but it's fun, and it's actually really important during this time. Because during the mid-80s, there was a lot of like politicians and religious groups trying to ban heavy metal. It's kind of like a resurgence of what was happening in the 50s with rock music and the politicians then. But it moved from just normal rock to heavy metal. And in the 80s in America, there was a lot of people trying to stop heavy metal being produced. And actually, as a funny cameo, Ozzy Osbourne plays the preacher who's against the metal music. Yes, that Ozzy Osbourne biting the head of Bat. Metal rocker Ozzy Osbourne plays the character trying to stop metal music. I find it really funny, actually. Now, for the movie itself, it's actually not a really gory movie, and actually only a handful of people die. It's not spectacularly scary. I think it's rather tamed in many ways compared to a lot of horror movies that were coming out during this time. You know, at this time, a lot of them was like Gore Fest or Shock Fest, something like that. This kept it pretty tame. I think this was relying more on the storyline and the effects, which had kind of like it had the same kind of Highlander effects when the electricity was running, or the Terminator effects when they go back in time. It might be okay for kids to watch at a certain age, 10 onwards. There's only one scene parents you might not want your kids seeing, and there is a brief moment of nudity. Nothing much, not for too long, but could be there. But it's not overly scary. Now, one thing that's really cool about this is the soundtrack. And you'd expect a horror movie based on heavy metal should have a good soundtrack. And I was really surprised with this. In fact, I learned something about music I never knew about. So yay, that helped me. There's a short-lived supergroup called Fastway. Now, if you don't know what a supergroup is when many big names come together and form their own band. And this was like a metal supergroup at the time. Who was it? We had Fast Eddie. He was the guitarist from Motorhead and played the guitar in this band as well. Members of UFO joined it, members of The Clash joined it, and David King, now the headman for Flogging Molly, was part of the band as well. And as you would guess, they did a really, really good job. So the soundtrack for this movie is fantastic. If you like metal music, but you don't like the movie, maybe just listen to the soundtrack and I'm sure you'll find something good about it. So, rock on! And I have to say, it was a good directorial debut by Charles Martin Smith, who was in movies before this as an actor in movies such as like The Untouchables and American Graffiti. Though not big roles, he was pretty good in them, but I think he did a pretty good job directing it. Like I said, there's nothing special, but just the flow of the movie was pretty well done. Now, I think anyone my age or a bit older will understand this movie a little bit more. It's one of those very 80s movies, in that it's a real product of its time. Between the hair, the clothes, the music and the current affairs and a lot of the references, in many ways you couldn't say this movie held up or aged too well. Not like it looks bad or sounds bad, but for anybody who's younger, who might not understand those things, a lot of the movie will just be over the top of their head. But it's one of those things, if you lived in this time, you get a lot of these references. You know, it's like the whole dilemma for comedians. Do they talk about things in general that will age very well, or do they talk about current affairs where in 20 years people are like saying, I don't get that joke. Duh. However, if you're younger and you want to know more about that time, it'd be an interesting movie to watch as well. So maybe it's not for the casual viewer, but it's a good background movie at the same time. Is it a bad movie? No, not really. It's kind of fun and actually has some funny moments, especially with the guest appearances and the music, make it all worthwhile. I still think the whole persona of the rock idol in this, Sammy, is actually meant to be poking fun at Sammy Hagar. If you think about the time and Hagar's band and what he was doing at the time with the band, it all kind of fits. So, if you know who Sammy Hagar is, I'm showing my age here, you might understand and get a bit more of a kick from this movie as well. Especially if you think Sammy Hagar kind of destroyed the band he was in. Please, Dave Mustaine, come back. There's some really stupid parts in it, but you know, I think all movies have this. If I keep on looking at a movie for long enough, I can always find a problem with it. Some silly goofs and things that make you think like, what the hell? So, you know, that's to be taken lightly, with a grain of salt. There's a couple of ones like Roger, his friend, at the end, he's trying to, you know, be valiant and says, let me do this one thing right. And, you know, he's hardly in the movie that much, and he hasn't done anything wrong apart from trying to play a cassette tape because he doesn't quite believe his friend that a demonic demon has taken over this tape recording and record. It's hard to believe, really, because at this time his friend hadn't seen anything. So he's making it sound like he was there from the beginning and been fighting this demon from the very start, and that all this was his fault. It doesn't quite make sense. And then later, I think this is the bigger one. You know, towards the end, Sammy he goes out and starts trying to kill all these teenagers at prom, and they're all running out, and the police are there. And the policeman asks like, "Who was it? Who was it?" And the girl replies, "It was Sammy, Sammy." And immediately the police just says, like, Sammy Kerr, the rock star? Why would the police say that? A, Sammy Kerr died like a week ago, according to the news reports, or 2 weeks ago. And what, there's only one person in the whole world called Sammy? Why would the policeman just say, oh, Sammy, it must be Sammy Kerr, that person who died a long time ago and has come back through some type of demonic means through a record system, trying to kill all the teenagers and make people listen to rock music again, trying to destroy the world. Of course, that's the obvious answer. That's, as a policeman, should go straight to that thinking. And I just saw that and I was like, what? But again, I think like most movies, if you look close enough, you're always gonna find a problem with it, something like that. Who is this movie for? Well, like I said, anybody who likes metal music, anybody who lived in the 80s at my time, anybody who wants to maybe understand the 80s more, or anybody who wants a slightly different kind of horror movie. Because while the story is quite simple, the whole thing is a little bit different than a lot of other horror movies. And, you know, a lot of people have seen the classic 81s, and maybe you're looking for something a little bit different. Okay, who is this movie not for? Well, people who don't like metal music, people who believe rock is the devil's music, people who want a lot of blood and gore, that kind of viewership. I'd say, if you like movies like The Evil Dead, you'll probably like this movie. And by the way, there is one scene, it's towards the end, it's not the final scene, but it involves trying to kill evil spirit with a swirling down a toilet. And for me, that was one of the funniest moments in the movie. So, for all those who are about to rock, I salute you!